Hello and welcome to the first episode of season number 3 of our podcast, Just Us. And this evening, we're going to be having a conversation with Ernesto, who is the producer and the technical expert of our podcast.
Thank you.
And we have had a lot of conversations. In fact, the three of us, Mimi and Ernesto and I, have had conversations about DACA. And Ernesto, what is DACA and what is your perspective on that?
Okay. Well, first of all, I want to introduce myself, Ernesto Hernandez. I help produce the podcast. And two things before we get started into the subject. This is a subject that's really dear to my heart. Mm-hmm. It is my life. So if I happen to get emotional about it,
that's okay.
It will be okay.
Yes.
But I just want to let you know that's what it is. And second, I want to, in a way, dedicate this episode to all the DACA recipients out there, because we have a lot of them within our church. We have a lot of people in our community. I've told Bill, I know a lot of people out there. I actually asked one of the Facebook DACA groups that I'm in, hey, if you got the chance to be in a podcast, what would you like to share? What would you like to share in part of your story? So yeah, in a way, this episode, I want to dedicate it to them and to everyone in our community. So yes, DACA, Deferred Action for Childhood Arrivals, it was stated in 2012 during the Obama administration. At the time, I didn't know much what was happening. I just knew it was really good. This is not to get confused with the DREAM Act or Dreamers, which used to be at one point. The DREAM Act was, again, something we were called dreamers because we were children, we were teenagers that were brought to this country not because we wanted to come, but our parents were fleeing danger.
Yes.
They were fleeing persecution. They were fleeing many things. So they brought us here at a very young age. So at the time, there was something called that they were trying to create the DREAM Act, something for all these teenagers to give them a path to citizenship, give them a path to residency so they could be legal citizens of this country. However, that had a lot of hurdles, a lot of obstacles, but there was a light and DACA came to be. And like I said, it is not the DREAM Act as many people know it. Many people wished it was. But like I said, DACA was born in 2012, and it gave us a chance to not become citizens or residents of this country, but it gave us a chance to be able to seek higher education, to be able to work legally in this country. Again, like I mentioned, one of the requirements to be able to qualify and apply for DACA, Deferred Action, is that you must have entered the country before you were 16 years old. Mm-hmm. And you must have been able to also complete your education in this country. Mm-hmm. By education, we're talking high school.
Okay.
So because some of them did complete elementary school, but it differs, depending on what age you were. But you have to prove that you have education here in the U.S., that you were brought into this country before 16 years old. Mm-hmm. So that's kind of the premise to it and how it was born a little bit.
Now, who has DACA been extended to? Who is it for?
So again, DACA was for children of immigrants that came to this country undocumented.
Right.
So I'll talk a lot about my story because I don't really know other people's stories as much as I would like to for you all to hear other people's stories, but I'll share my story today. My parents came here back in the early 90s, and they brought me. I was 6 months old when I arrived in this country.
From where?
From Mexico.
Okay.
Yeah, my parents fled Mexico, and their story, quick little thing, my mom, she was 18 years old at the time, and she was carrying a 6-month-old baby across the desert for 3 days.
Wow.
With no help, no anything. She just knew she had to make it to the USA because this is where my dad was already. Mm-hmm. He had 2 months prior to my mom leaving Mexico, my dad had left. So my dad left when I was 4 months old. He came, kind of saw how things were going, and then he was like, you have to come and we can't stay. We can't stay. We have to go. So that's when we arrived. And many of us DACA recipients share that same story, that our parents fled when we were very young. So again, it is extended to, I've met people that are literally from all over the world. I met people from Italy, from South America, from Europe, from Africa, from Asia. Most of the time you tend to hear about Hispanics, Mexicans, Central Americans, Hondurans, Nicaragua, people from Nicaragua. But we've seen cases out there of people from Ethiopia, from Korea. And same thing, their parents fled their country for X, Y, and Z reasons. They got here, but these children did not come. They didn't choose to be brought here.
Right.
So that was the whole premise to the case. Can this country, can the administration do something for these children that we were not forced. We were just brought, because our parents came. So we tagged along on the journey with our parents, but now we were stuck in this country, which is a country where we attended schools. We went to school, we learned the language, we learned the customs, the culture, but we were in a way in danger of being deported to a country which we did not know, because those were countries. I didn't grow up in Mexico.
Right.
So as much as we wish we could go back to Mexico, we couldn't, because we were undocumented in this country. So the moment you leave, you put yourself back in danger.
So you've never been to Mexico? Then,
I've never been to
Mexico. As far as being born there, but you never visited when you could remember?
Yes, I was not able to, because being undocumented, you can't leave the country. And if you do leave, you can't come back unless you find very difficult ways to come back to the country. And but yeah, for many years, my parents didn't, like I said, my mom arrived. She was 18 years old with a 6-month baby, and my dad was 20 years old. Wow. They left their house. I look at some of the teenagers here at the academy, or I look at the interns at the office, and I see, I'm like, that's my mom.
Yeah. So when you said your father left Mexico first, and then your mother left, when you said flee, can you share what they were fleeing, or why they felt they had to flee from Mexico?
It's hard to talk about this. It's hard to share this, but it was, they knew that if we stayed there, we were in danger, and that their son was not going to make it if they stayed. Okay. They knew that their son would have not a bright future, but also things were not good. Things were getting really dangerous in the part where they were, so they had to leave, and it wasn't like, hey, let's go apply and let's go get in line, because the process takes up to 3 to 4 years.
Long time.
And it's one of those you get up and go. You don't pack your bags. You just, whatever you're wearing, you pack a backpack with maybe water and some extra clothes, and you run and you don't look back. That's pretty much the case. And from where my parents live to getting to the border, that was a journey of its own. That was, if I recall, my dad's journey was about 4 weeks long. And at the time there was no cell phones or texting. So it's not like, hey, let me send you updates. It's just, we hope to hear back from you.
Wow, that's crazy.
Hopefully. And a lot of people leave their countries and they go missing, and you never hear back. You never hear about them anymore. So anyways, my dad was able to make it. The first time he was able to get in contact with my mom and my grandma was after 4 weeks of traveling. He was able to find some coins and get on a phone and call home, and that's the thing, they didn't even have a phone back home. So he called, I think, the local pharmacy. Wow. And he said, can you deliver this message to my family and let them know I'm safe and I'm here, and I'll call back again in 2 weeks when I'm across the border and someplace safe.
Wow.
The level of urgency that story indicates is pretty significant.
Yeah.
For a young woman, 19 you said, or 18, and to carry a 6-month-old baby, that tells us that there was something important motivating because that's assuming a lot of risk.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And that's, Ernesto, how many people has DACA been able to be a blessing to?
If I am not mistaken, there are 600,000 of us in this country. And I'm not sure if that's the most updated number. I do remember this number from back in 2018. But at the time in 2018, DACA had been paused. Let's call it paused. They wanted to cancel it, but it was paused, so there was no new applicants.
Right.
So at the time, there was 600,000 of us that were able to get in this window from 2012 to about 2016, in a 4-year window. And again, we were all teenagers that were in this country. We attended the schools here, and we went through the whole system here.
Yeah.
And that was... For us, we were living in a limbo. So it was like, what's next? We knew we couldn't go to college because we didn't have the finances to that. We couldn't work because we didn't have a document that says you can work. Right. We couldn't have a driver's license. So you're at a really pivotal moment in our age. We were 16, 17 years old, and it's like we're about to go into this quote-unquote adulthood, where you get your driver's license, where you go to college, where you're doing all these things as an adult, but we couldn't.
Right. You're in limbo.
Because and at that point, yes, you graduate high school and you have to go work under the table jobs or a little bit of the gig economy kind of thing, types of jobs, or some of them were sadly would get deported at that point. They were not protected. So DACA came to offer a sort of protection for all these teenagers.
So what was for DACA recipients or the people enrolled in that program, how did DACA change their lives for
them? It changed everything.
How? Talk about that. What did it do for them?
It's like I can't even explain it. It's like your life goes through it's through a complete 360 change because now there's hope. Imagine the moment that someone instills hope in you. That just changes your whole life. But
it's huge.
Yeah, it does.
But yeah, it was some of the things that it brought to the community was that peace of mind, because for many years we lived scared. You live in that. And I was literally just talking to my mom recently. I told her, I was like, I remember she would tell us, like, we're going to go to work. It was summer. Summer, you think kids are outside playing. We're talking the 90s. Kids are at the arcade playing at the park, at the community center. But not for us. For us, it was like mom and dad have to go to work, and you three need to hide. Do not open the door. Hide. Do not make loud noises. Do not watch TV. And this is for 8 hours of the day.
Don't draw attention.
Don't draw any sort of attention, because the moment we draw attention, my parents run a risk of themselves being deported. Yeah. And then it's a chain of events. But the moment DACA comes into place, it's kind of like it gives you peace. It gives you that you're not worried about what if I get pulled over, what if a police officer says something to me, what if someone's knocking at the door. It really helped with a lot of that.
So you slept a lot better at night.
Oh, definitely. I drove a lot. From everything, from the moment you wake up and you're no longer worried, the moment you step out of your house, because you could, if you happen to be driving, obviously we're driving without a driver's license. If you get pulled over, they're going to ask, where's your driver's license? Well, why don't you have one? At the time, police officers were allowed to ask all these questions. Yeah. And it was tough for many, because you had to really hide and stay under the radar for decades.
Now, I've read from this Texas newspaper, this story. It says that since the Obama administration started the DACA program, it approved more than 800,000 people over the past decade, including 101,000 current DACA recipients who live in Texas. But right now, because of the recent court ruling by this Judge Andrew Hannon, he's trying to state that the DACA applications or the DACA program itself is illegal because the president has had no permission or right to begin an immigration program. And now this article just tells the story of 2 DACA recipients, but the implication for that is one person said in the story, this is Alejandro Mayorkas, I think I said his name right, Secretary for Homeland Security. He said last week that thanks to DACA, we have been enriched by young people who contribute so much to our communities and to our country. And then he says, yet we need Congress to pass legislation that provides an enduring solution for young dreamers who have known no country other than the U.S. as their own. So he's saying that when you have programs like this for children who are born here or brought here very young age, it enriches our communities and it also enriches their lives. As you said, definitely. It changes everything. So you had a 360, you can apply to college, you can get an education, you can get a license, you can get a social security card. You can do all these things so you can contribute to society. And
we would not have had this podcast without Ernesto.
Without Ernesto, and that is absolutely true, because I couldn't do what he does.
No.
You know, all the behind the scenes things, you know, and there's so many talented young people who are marginalized or oppressed because of it, because of this limbo state that they're in. And now you're supposedly have a government who's supposed to welcome, you know, immigrants and refugees and give them a place of refuge because of the story you shared about your parents coming here, fleeing to come here, to give them a new start and a new hope, like Jeremiah, 11 says, or Jeremiah 22 says, you know, to give you a hope and a future. And some of these governments and the politics are trying to stop that. What are the implications for not having a program like DACA?
Well, one of the reasons why it's when you don't know about something, you see it as a threat. And many times people have talked about, because they don't know what they're talking about, they misrepresent it. And we're talking about politicians, and they haven't done their homework of what DACA is. They talk about DACA as it's pretty much a gateway for criminals and all this stuff to come into the country. But what they don't understand is that we go through a very rigorous process of security. We have to be pretty much the definition of the perfect citizen. We go through, every 2 years, we have to get, we go through like a 3-level background check. We have to report to immigration, to USCIS services. We have to report to our local police station and county stations in some states. You have to report because that's where they conduct your background check. Okay. So in a way, they're like, give us all your information, sit right there. In case something pops up, we'll detain you here on the moment. So that happens. We also have to send in our biometrics to get done at Homeland Security. So it's a very high level of security that we have to go through, and any little bump in our record could take DACA away from us. So like I said, many of these politicians that have talked against it, they're like, oh, it's a gate for criminals to come into the country. It's an easy pass for all these people to abuse the system, which again, that is misinformation, because we DACA recipients we don't receive any federal grants. We don't receive we give to Social Security, but we won't ever receive that in return. We don't receive federal grants, no federal aid. We don't receive aid for education purposes, no federal grants, none of that stuff. So again, they talk out of ignorance, for lack of a better word. But yeah, that's what we have to live through. But in a way, for us, is in a way we are happy to have that, and we'll put up with it, sadly, because that's how we can stay here with our families, and it's protecting us from again going back to a place that we don't know. It's So you were saying, how is this also bringing? I say when I got DACA, a teenager, and many of us were teenagers, but now we're professionals. Mm-hmm. We have, I know, dozens of doctors that have DACA, engineers, nurses, business owners. I know so many professionals that are giving to this country because they were able to pursue higher education.
Right.
So these were, imagine, DACA would have never happened, and these 800,000 individuals would have been deported. That's 800,000 talented individuals. A lot of them were at the forefront of COVID in hospitals. They're nurses. Like I said, a lot of them are engineers. A lot of them are lawyers, engineers in the front line of new discoveries in science. I actually know a couple that are science researchers. They're out there doing big research to advance science. And if it wasn't for DACA, we wouldn't be able to help and contribute.
They wouldn't have been able to get the education to do that.
Pursue that higher education.
So I have a question for you. Maybe it's twofold. I have heard personally people say that, immigrants or refugees, they come to this country and they're taking our jobs and they don't contribute, to our society, but they're taking our tax dollars, or my tax dollars, are going to them, and they're taking our jobs. And then, some other people say that, this DACA program, rewards immigrants to break the law, to come to this country, and they're coming here illegally, and it creates an avenue for other people to break the law also. I don't know if that's necessarily true. What jobs are they taking from the citizens of this country?
I think we all have the same opportunities for jobs.
Yeah.
If anything, before the job market was completely open, but the moment we were able to get work permits, it was a free for all kind of thing, and we went after what our passions were and how we were able to contribute to this country. Because again, this is the country where we grew up. We don't know any other place, just like your Bill. This is where we were raised. This is the education system we know. This is the culture we know. And we wanted to be, give back to this country. Before DACA, one of the only ways was if you enlisted in the military. And we have cases where people enlisted in the military to get adjustment in their status, and sadly, they were just used by the system and they were deported. You have a lot of veterans that have been deported.
I've heard
Veterans that have been deported.
Wow.
After they served in this country. Yeah, so that's a whole other topic.
They risked their lives.
Yeah.
Maybe were injured or,
Yeah. And they were deported after their time in service. So, like I said, for us, it was...
That doesn't sit well.
We wanted to be contributors to this country, but we couldn't. We couldn't. And it was... I remember thinking, like, I want to go to school and I want to go be an engineer and study science. And at the time, I wanted to be an aerospace engineer. And I was able to be part of a NASA and JPL programs in high school, but I knew there was nothing else I could do because that was the end of the road for me. Yeah. Once I graduated high school, that was it for me. So back to you mentioned, what are we, people come and take jobs and take things. The jobs are out there, if Mimi takes a job, it's no different than someone that holds a work permit can take that job too. So that's how I see it. It's a free market of jobs. Now, some of us have master's degrees and PhDs, and we're going to go after those jobs. We're not going to go after, the other jobs, fast food and whatnot. We're not going to go after those. We're going to go after what's in our interest and our professions. Because now we're professionals.
But you've worked for it.
And we've worked really hard for it.
Yes.
And like I mentioned, we've contributed to the educational system by paying. We have to pay cash if we want to go to college. And some of these colleges are very expensive. We're talking on the cheap side, you're paying $10,000 a year, and you have to pay cash. You cannot. There is no payment system is you pay cash, you give $10,000 up front, then you can sign up for classes. And they're not going to return that money to us. That money is going to stay in the educational system. Same thing when we go to work, we pay our taxes, we give to Social Security. We have to file our taxes every year. That is part of our process. We have to show proof that we are paying taxes and that we are contributing citizens to this country. Yet we don't see that money. We don't see a dime of that money back.
Yeah, that's a hard one to swallow because, people are coming here legitimately to look for better opportunities, like your father and then your mother who followed. And I'm sure they didn't come and take jobs from people. I don't know what this perceived theft of employment is. I'm not sure where that is, because without, for example, migrant workers or immigrants to do some of the jobs that we don't want to do, we wouldn't have food on our tables, or it'd be harder to get, and they work very hard. And we have a lot to thank, our seasonal workers for the farmers, and those who work in the orchards. They work very hard, and their children benefit. And I read a story about that. I think a while ago we were chatting about the young woman. There's a picture of her. I think it was in either Time magazine or Newsweek magazine. She was in a field with her parents who were migrant workers, and she had on her cap and gown. She had just graduated from college, and she decided to take her graduation picture with her parents who undocumented, who were working in the fields.
That's amazing.
Because they worked so hard to put her through, school, so she can have that opportunity to bless them and take that picture with them in the field. And that spoke volumes to me. And I think that smashes all of the preconceived ideas about, immigrants or refugees or DACA recipients coming here and taking jobs.
Well, don't we have a labor shortage to begin with?
Yeah.
So if you take out, is it, between 600,000 and 800,000 people, if you take those workers out, the labor shortage would be even worse.
Greater,
Ernesto, I want to use a word. Even though, like we've talked about, it's not perfect. The program isn't perfect, and there's still, you contribute through taxes and Social Security and don't get those benefits. But for many DACA recipients, was it life-changing?
It is, and we are okay, and it sounds sad, but we are okay with putting up with that. If that's the cost that we have to pay to stay in this country with our families, then we will pay for it. Oh, and I forgot to mention, talking about cost and money, if I mentioned earlier, we have to renew our process every 2 years. We have to report, and our permits expire every 2 years. Every 2 years, we have to pay about $1,500 to renew our permits.
Wow.
You do the math, $1,500 times 800,000 recipients.
That's a lot.
That's a lot of money.
Yeah.
That's all I'm going to say. And that's every 2 years. And we do not get that money back. It's not like, oh, you keep paying the day you become a citizen, you get it all back. No, it's not it's not a deposit on citizenship. It's we have to pay, like we're paying for the right to work. And we're okay with it. That's the price we have to pay to sadly be here with our families.
So what does the pathway to citizenship look like? Is there one? I mean, I know I've heard it talked about before, but...
Yeah, I get that one a lot. Why don't you just become a citizen?
Yeah, I know. They say there's no dumb questions.
Yeah.
I don't necessarily...
Yeah, and I'm sure a lot of you or a lot of listeners are like, just go become a citizen,
but it's not that easy.
It is not. I wish. If you know where that line is, please point it my way, because I've been looking for that line for 30 years.
Okay.
And DACA is not a path to citizenship or residency, sadly. It is a limbo state.
Yeah.
We are... Yes, DACA comes with all the beauty of being able to drive, and you can work, and we can go to school and all these things, but it also has its negatives, to where we cannot leave the country the moment we leave the country, we lose that status.
Yeah.
So if I was to choose to leave tomorrow to visit my grandparents in Mexico, I would instantly lose everything, and I would, in a way, be shunned from this country, and I cannot come back.
Even Canada?
Nowhere. Like, I can leave the
the
U.S. territory.
U.S.
territory.
The U.S. territory.
So that's very limiting then.
Yeah, so we're limited to 50 states and U.S. territories.
So it's just enough to keep you here.
Yeah.
To stay here.
Yeah.
With the renewal process every.
Yes, because in that way we can keep contributing to the U.S. economy.
So
that's how it is.
So with this court ruling now, I guess the ruling is now in Texas is now in limbo because legislators are assuming that the court is going to vote to end DACA. Now I'm just hearing it, and it's nerve-wracking for me to hear for all the people who are relying on this program. So, and I don't expect for you to know all the answers to this, but if this court were to decide to end the DACA program, then what would happen to all of the recipients, these 800,000 plus people, immigrants, who are relying on it to stay here, to work, to get their education, to live?
So the moment, if let's say DACA was to be terminated today, from my understanding, there might be lawyers out there listening to this, but from my understanding is, if it was to end right now, we lose our work permits, therefore we cannot show up to work tomorrow. And most likely there would be a knock at the door in the morning because they know where we live, and they're like, you are no longer protected by this program, you are now a fugitive of the law.
Oh my word.
Because you are breaking the law by being here in this country without status.
Yeah.
So there would be a lot of panic.
So, yeah. I mean, just reading this article from the Texas newspaper.
Yeah, doctors cannot go to surgeries tomorrow.
Oh, dear.
Lawyers cannot show up to court tomorrow. Teachers cannot show up to the classroom tomorrow. I cannot legally show up to work tomorrow. Mm-hmm. That would happen if the moment that happens, and that's the end of the road for many people in that case. And like I said, there would be the knock on the door because through the process we have to update them. We have to update the system every single move. Mm-hmm. That like they know everything that we're up. They know exactly where I work. They know who I'm married to. They know where I live. They know what I drive. Mm-hmm. They know everything about my life.
And so, go ahead. I'm sorry.
Go ahead, Mimi.
And so then, you're saying you would have to leave this place, and go to. I'm not going to say go back, but you'd have to leave this place, and go to Mexico, where yes, your family's there, but you're not familiar with ever living there.
Some relatives.
Yeah, your
relatives. Parents are
relatives.
here and
Correct.
siblings.
But you yourself, I mean...
Yeah, and that would be my case and 800,000 other people that would have to leave. Mm-hmm. That would... I'm sure at first it would be like, you have to leave, but then there would be a lot of incarcerations and a lot of, in a way, persecution for these individuals because the law says they have to leave and you cannot stay here. And then they would send you back to your country, which we've been here.
But
our
the
entire
U.S.
lives.
is your country.
Exactly. So it's one of those, yes, I'm Mexican and I was born in Mexico, but I do not know Mexico.
Right.
It's like, why... That is not my home.
This is all you've known.
Yeah, exactly. This is all I've known, all we've known.
Yeah.
And that's the case where it's one of those, like, why I don't want to go to a place that I don't know. So that's what would happen.
Then the curious part of me would ask, all these people who would have to leave, God forbid, and they go back to wherever, how would they be received in those countries they don't know anything about? So would you be able to thrive in Mexico, for example, or someone from Ethiopia or Central America? How would they be received on that end?
It's been really interesting to see because there have been people DACA recipients that in a way they've given up because they're like, there's nothing beyond this. Like I'm tired of being trapped. Yeah. We have a saying, we call it the golden cage. Because even though the cage is made out of gold, it's still a cage.
Wow.
There's even a song in Spanish that refers to that. And yes, this place is a golden place, but you're trapped. So there's been people are like, we're tired of being trapped, so they go back to their country. Sadly, we can't establish ourselves because we don't have any sort of records or documentations in those countries. So imagine you go to Germany and try to establish yourselves. You don't have an ID, you don't have a birth certificate, you don't have anything. Your education might not be valid there. So in a way, like I said, I've seen many DACA recipients that have gone back to Mexico. These are the cases I know, and they end up working maybe call centers. They ended up working supermarkets because back there it's you're a blank slate. You're a ghost to them because you never lived there. You were never a citizen of that country.
Right. So there is one thing that gives me hope, because I appreciate, Ernesto, you're kind of unpacking the emotions of that. The one thing that gives me hope is I read that this is one of the few programs that has strong bipartisan political support. In other words, Republicans and Democrats. Yeah. And so that gives me hope, because there are very few issues that both parties recognize that these people are, the DACA recipients, are hardworking, productive people, and from a human standpoint, like you said, to send them home or to send them to another country that they've never lived in would be inhumane. Yeah. So, while this court case does concern me, the hope that I have is based on that there's something about American determination. If people come together, they can get a lot done.
Oh, and there's a lot of advocacy happening for this. There's a lot of good people out there. We have a lot of lawyers. We have a lot of community leaders. There's even some senators that are educating themselves with the community, and there's a lot of support from the community. And again, the cities and the states, they've seen how much weight we can hold and how much we can carry and how much we're helping to the economy. Like I said, just COVID was a huge thing. And and again, now that we're in the professional field, maybe before they didn't see it because it was a lot of teenagers. But now that we've grown and we're able to buy a house and buy cars and take out loans now, they're opening more. There's more programs to where we can take out loans to be home buyers and loans for education. Like I said, doctors, engineers, all that workforce, they're starting to see the power in it. Right. And we're bilingual. Some are trilingual.
Right. Absolutely.
How much they're contributing to everything that is happening in this country.
Yeah.
Right. And that is very significant. So, Ernesto, what is it like for you if you meet somebody who is also a DACA recipient? What kind of bond or connection is that when you meet someone else who knows and has experienced that story?
Maybe a lot of our viewers are Adventists. It's like that. The moment you meet another Adventist, it's like, I know you. I know your heart. I know what you believe in. I know what's in your brain. I know what you believe in. That's that same sentiment of like, we might be from different countries. We might be from different states, but the community is so tight because we know each other's hearts.
Right.
We know that a lot of us have the same stories. I would say maybe 80% of us had that same story where our parents fled.
Yeah.
And we grew up in this country. We went through the educational system. And that's that sentiment. It's a brotherhood. We're really connected. And that bond is really strong. And it to me, it's like the moment you say you're a DACA recipient, we instantly become family and
Yeah.
friends. Like
Right.
I said, it's kind of like meeting an Adventist in another country or another state. Like you instantly become connected with them. That's the best way I can explain it.
Right, right. I must admit, I'm kind of embarrassed to say this. I remember hearing about in the news and reading about it, but I must say, Ernesto, I really appreciate you sharing about it because it's totally different when you have a friend that is part of this. All of a sudden, it's not theoretical.
Right. It's real.
And when I think about
Very
that,
real.
and I hear in your voice when you describe how this was life-changing, you didn't have to worry about that knock, from the immigration. If it, that is very significant on the human level. For you and I, Mimi, to think, okay, what would our life be like? And then this comes along, and that we use the word life-changing. Even though it's not ideal, but it was significant.
Yeah.
Yeah. It was, many people say the day we received DACA was like the day we won the lottery.
Wow.
That's how life-changing it was.
So that's the gold part of it, the golden part of it.
Yeah, you got the golden ticket.
Yeah.
In a way, and it's a lot of. It's really interesting. Like I said, many people have many different stories than my story.
Yeah.
What they go through on an everyday. I know people that even though they're DACA and they can work legally and get driver's license, they still choose not to talk about it because I actually have a friend. He says if I was to mention, he freelances in media production. He says if I was to mention to my clients or make an open statement that I'm a DACA recipient, I would lose a lot of clients.
So he gets judged.
I would lose a lot of money because he knows that there's a lot of people that are not educated on what DACA is. Yeah. However, if they knew, and he knows that that's his community, it's so sad to know that he lives in a community where they're uneducated about this topic. Yeah. And so he chooses to stay quiet about it. He chooses not to speak up about it. And there's many people like that choose to. There's others like me that have, this is who we are. We've embraced it and we love sharing our story. And I take it as, the more we can educate our communities in this, the stronger we can become, and the more you can get to know your brothers and your neighbors.
Right. And you would hope with that education comes some empathy.
Oh, yeah,
because
definitely.
A lot of times right now, especially during, I call it the ice storm, when ice was, all the people during that 2016, 2017, when all those kids were in the cages and the raids was just so disheartening. But a lot of people chose to be willfully ignorant about what was going on. And once I think it's critical, once to do better, to be better, and that empathy plays an important role in how you treat your neighbors. And I'm not saying just your neighbors who live across from you, but your neighbors, the ones who some people call the others, but to have that empathy, to understand and to feel your heart, and yes, to feel your heart and to show that you care about what you're dealing with. So I really appreciate your story and how this means so much to you. And there's so many other people who are experiencing the same thing. Even though I haven't experienced that, my heart is always going to be with you there. This country wasn't just for one set of people. This country, this American dream, or whatever that dream is, this country wasn't built for just one set or group of people. Right. And I think we need to extend our hearts and we need to extend our empathy and our brother and sisterhood to people who are experiencing reasons to flee their home countries to come here, or to go anywhere else for that matter. But the willful ignorance has to stop and has to go away because it's blinding us of empathy.
This topic, DACA, is such a deep topic, and like I said, I can talk about it for hours, and I choose to share my story because you never know who
Yeah.
Who's going to learn something from it? And just and there's so many people out there whose stories. I was talking with Bill recently, Mimi, about there's so many people in our educational system and our academies and our Adventist universities that are DACA recipients, and they're stuck in that limbo in a way, and they want to pursue higher education, they want to be professionals, they want to be, good law-abiding citizens that give back to this country, but they don't have the resources sometimes to chase that higher education. Like I said, one of the biggest obstacles is, yes, you can go to higher education, but you are treated as an international student, which, international tuition is really expensive. Really, really expensive. So it might, if
I never thought of that.
If for someone that's here local, going to community college is going to cost them $5,000. If you're an international student, it's going to cost you 4 times that, probably, like $20,000 a year. So that's one of the obstacles, because they have to pay it cash. That's the thing. In 4 years, that's $80,000 cash that you have to pay up front. It's really hard. So I've met a lot of students in our academies that are. And that's the thing. The program is open right now for new applicants. So we have teenagers. We have 17-year-olds that are worried about, I should apply for DACA, because they want to, but then they're trying to realize, how can we navigate all these turbulent waters? And I know students at Walla Walla that are DACA recipients, at Southern, at Loma Linda. I have a friend who's going to medical school at Loma Linda, and he's a DACA recipient, and he's going to be a future doctor. And there are brothers and sisters from Adventist entities too. Yeah. And they're in our churches, and they're suffering because they're living in that uncertainty, and just like them, they're everywhere.
Right.
Yeah. So it's we have. I was recently listening to a documentary, and it was talking about, we fled and we seeked refuge, and the day, who knows what could happen in the future if the tables were to ever turn. Would other countries offer you refuge if you ever had to leave this country? How did you treat those? And the documentary was talking about Colombia and Venezuela, how Venezuelans, Colombians are welcoming Venezuelan refugees with open arms and hands, because when Colombians were fleeing in the 80s to Venezuela, they were welcomed with open arms.
Open arms, good.
So now it's like, hey, you took care of me back then, now I will take care of you.
The tables turned.
The tables have turned, and now they're taking care of each other, because it's that sentiment of caring for one another. Yeah. So that hits really hard, because it's like, how are we treating those that are coming here, fleeing and seeking refuge? What's different stories.
What strikes me is, if you would not have shared your story, Ernesto, like I said, I was aware that it happened, but it was just something, that happened in the news. But by your sharing, 2 things have happened, at least in my heart, is I have become a big supporter of this program, now understanding the reality on the human level. And it's opened my mind to, I need to be more aware of things like this that affect people. I think on a human level, sometimes we can kind of, not in my backyard. In other words, this doesn't affect me, so it's not my issue. But on a human level, you're my friend.
Yeah.
Now it's my issue. I care about this. Have you ever encountered people who don't understand it, and they are kind of judgmental when they hear about your story?
If anything, I've had people say, "But you're one of the good ones."
What does that mean?
we're all the good ones.
But you're one of the good ones. Is that operative? But
you're one of the good ones. You follow the law. You do things the right way. And again, we're talking about DACA, so I say every DACA recipient is following the law. Every DACA recipient is doing everything I do, and maybe even bigger, better things.
Right.
So I hear that a lot, and it hurts because I'm thinking like, so you're saying my parents or my uncles or my friends or our church members are not the good ones.
Yeah.
Like
who are the bad ones?
Exactly. Yeah. Like, who are we to say who are the good ones and who are the bad ones? Yeah. You know, so that's what I get a lot of when people hear my story.
Wow.
And to me, it's
wow.
I don't know. You know, I've never gotten anyone that said something negative or anything. But to me, I'm like, you're not saying something negative about me. You're saying something negative about everyone else I care about and everyone else that's an immigrant like myself.
Yep.
Right.
So, and I feel like that hurts even more.
Yeah.
And the whole premise of our podcast has been 2 Corinthians 7 to make room for us in your hearts. You know, to be Christians. There's a Bible verse in Leviticus 19 that, as I've been listening to you, Ernesto, it's come to my mind. It says, verses 33 and 34, when a stranger sojourns with you in your land, you shall not do him wrong. You shall not treat the stranger who sojourns with you as you shall treat the stranger who sojourns with you as the native among you, and you shall love him as yourself. Yeah. For you were strangers in the land of Egypt. I am the Lord your God.
Wow.
Yes.
What is the Bible verse again?
Leviticus 19, 33 and 34.
Mm-hmm.
So God is calling us. He says we are to love the stranger who sojourns. So that is a biblical mandate. We were talking earlier. Mimi, what's a verse you found?
Well, the whole book of Deuteronomy.
Yeah.
I mean, Leviticus and Deuteronomy talks about I don't like this word. I guess it depends on the translation of the scriptures you're reading, but this word says the alien in your land.
The foreigner in your
foreigner,
land.
The alien, the immigrant, the refugee who is in your land. And the whole book of Deuteronomy, at least a lot of it, talks about how to welcome the strangers that are in your land. Mm-hmm. And one of those verses, and I like this because I'm all about like justice, and I like it, it's Deuteronomy, the first chapter. It says, give the members of your community a fair hearing and judge rightly between one person and another, whether citizen or resident alien. Again, that word alien can be translated to stranger, to immigrant, to sojourner. Foreigner, sojourner, whomever. And then there's another one that I really like because it hits home, because it calls us we can't be hypocrites. And it says it's in Deuteronomy 6:10-13, and it says the people of Israel are made aware that the land had come to them as a gift from God, and they were to remember that they were once aliens.
Wow.
Okay.
Where is that one found?
This is Deuteronomy 6:10-13. And, I was looking at the United Nations website where it says the top 10 countries with the highest number of foreign-born residents or immigrants. This is from the United Nations 2020 report. It's the United States is the country that has the most foreign-born residents at 50.6 million people. And then Germany is second, and then it goes on down. And that tells me, okay, look at all the people who have come to the U.S., right, for whatever reason, seeking asylum, whatever, from other countries to come here looking for that golden dream or that golden opportunity, but are in cages, and then those cages I don't like. I don't like anything about a cage.
No.
And what the scriptures tells us is to be fair and just, because we were also foreigners and strangers, and we need the same kind of justice. Yeah. Right? Yeah. And we can't take ownership of this is, even the song, what is that song called? This land is your land, this land is my land. Yeah. Right? So who are we referring to when we sing those words?
That's a good question.
Who are we referring to?
And it says this land is your land before even saying this land is my land.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Who are we referring to? And then you know, what does that mean when we hear God give Moses this information to share with the people? Remember, because he knew people would forget. Yeah. Remember that you were once aliens or foreigners, and you were that person in Egypt under a slave mandate. And go ahead.
There's one in Hebrews 13 I really like, 1 and 2. It says, "Let brotherly love continue. Do not neglect to show hospitality to strangers, for thereby some have entertained angels unawares."
Yes.
Wow.
So the Bible calls us to be hospitable.
Correct.
And you know, making room in our hearts. So the scripture is telling me to care about DACA recipients.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely.
That's what the scripture is asking us to. And it's interesting that the Sabbath commandment, you know, it says, you know, to not do any work, you nor your
mother, your father, or the stranger
that is within your gates. So that Sabbath rest is for the sojourner, the stranger that is among you. So right in the Ten Commandments, there's an acknowledgement of the openness that God wants us to have. So that kind of move. Were there any other verses you want to share, Mimi, as we wind down here?
And then the one thing I like about that commandment, about the Sabbath commandment, is that this, even though we're Seventh-day Adventists, the Sabbath isn't just for us.
No.
Oh, yeah.
The Sabbath is for anybody else.
The Sabbath was made for man.
Correct. Who wants to welcome it. You get a rest, you get a rest, I get a rest. Yeah. Whether you are a native-born citizen or a stranger that is within my gates, you get rest. And what an awesome and phenomenal gift that is of love. And I think Matthew, I really like Matthew chapter 2 because when people talk about, and I've shared this with you both before, but when people talk about this horrible word, I don't like the word illegals and I don't like the word alien. Okay, so you know, I'm not hiding anything. I don't like those words, especially when referring to persons. I like to talk to people about Matthew chapter 2, and this is the time when the Magi visited Jerusalem, or Israel, Jerusalem, and Herod, the jealous madman that he was at the time, put out a political mandate that said, I want you to, because he heard about the birth of Jesus, I want you to go and kill all the babies, the male babies, okay? And because I don't want anybody to overtake my power. So he put out a political agenda of genocide against infants and their families. Jesus was one of them. This is what I don't want people to forget. When you're talking about illegals and aliens, remember the story of Jesus. When you're pointing fingers at DACA recipients or refugees or people seeking asylum, remember the story of Jesus. If it wasn't for God sending the angel to wake up Joseph in the middle of the night
to flee
and say, get up and flee.
With a baby.
Where? With the baby. Yeah. Where? To Egypt. Okay? And stay there until I tell you to leave.
Yeah.
So, like you said, your family.
The angel didn't tell him, like, go process your visa and
don't pack your bags.
No, go.
He said, get up now and go. So all they had to do was take a donkey or something, like you said, put some water in a backpack and go. And they fled to a foreign land. And from what I can tell, reading the scriptures, they got to Egypt, but it didn't say that they were held in cages at the border, until they can get processed. It didn't say that baby Jesus was stripped away from his parents, and sent somewhere else while his parents were somewhere else. It didn't say any of that. It said that they remained in Egypt until a time when Herod died. And then the political genocide was over. So God provided an example for us in how the Egyptians at that time received Jesus and his family. And he was a carpenter, Joseph, So I believe he may have worked there and contributed to that society.
Oh, yeah.
You know, even though their religion was different, their faith was different, their culture was different, their language was different, but they were able to establish something there. Yeah. And then they left and went back when Herod died. So they sought asylum, they sought refuge in Egypt.
Yeah.
And that is a perfect and beautiful example, I think, of how we are supposed to treat our neighbors in other countries. Now, when I say neighbors now, I mean your other countries who are coming here seeking asylum. We can't point fingers. You know, we can't marginalize people or oppress people with our biases, our prejudice, our racism, whatever it is that we're harboring in our hearts. We need to give that to God and start showing our neighbors what it means to love them.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I wonder, you know, when Jesus and his family fled, I wonder how many other families had the chance to flee.
That's a good one.
You know, I'm sure it's not on the Bible or anything, but they had to, a lot of people fled for their children.
Yep.
And I told Bill this story. I think this is when my mom tells me this story, when she was coming across the desert, 3 days across the desert, carrying a child. It was one night. And she said that she got lost because for a moment you find groups in the desert and then you kind of trek along with them, but then you get separated. So it was dark at night in the desert. It was cold. She was alone. And you're worried a coyote's gonna attack. What's gonna happen? Snakes. Someone's gonna snatch the baby away. And so she's walking across, and you can't fall asleep. Like she had to stay up till she made it to safety. And then out of nowhere, you're kind of vigilant, but at the same time you're kind of desperate. So she said that a human approached her as she was walking, and he waved at the distance, and he was like, "Hey, lady," obviously in Spanish, "where are you headed?" And she's like, "Don't talk to strangers, just keep walking." Mm-hmm. We're talking an 18-year-old in the desert, and this man approaches her. You can imagine what are the things that went through her mind that could happen to her at night.
Yep.
She said that this individual kept approached, and he said, "Don't worry, I'm here to help you." And she said, "Don't talk to strangers, keep walking." And he said, "Please let me help you. I have water for you." Eventually, as they kept walking, she opened up and she allowed him to help. And he said, "Can I help you carry the baby so you can get some rest, so you can sit down, and then we'll keep walking together." She very hesitantly, she handed the baby, and she was like praying. At the time, she was not religious, but she prayed to whoever to help her in that moment. So she handed the baby over, and she drank water. She was able to sit for a moment, and she's like, "The baby's just going to start crying." She's like, "We can't have a baby crying in the desert because immigration officers are going to find us." So she said, somehow the baby never cried. While this gentleman was holding the baby never cried, and she was able to like massage her feet, drink water, put her hair up in a ponytail, and then she's like, "Okay, let's go, let's keep walking." And the gentleman said, "I'll carry the baby for a little bit, I'll help you for a little bit." So they walked, and then they got to a fence, and then the guy said, "Go over the fence, I'll hand you the baby once you over the fence." And she went over the fence. He went over the fence with the baby. He gave her the baby, and he's like, "Good luck with your journey."
Wow.
Wow.
And she never saw him again.
Oh, have mercy.
The next day, she made it home.
Praise God. What a story.
We don't know who that was, but he got to carry me across the desert for my safety and for my mom's safety. But yeah, I just wanted to share that story because, and when I shared it with Bill, he said, "What did you say, Bill?" I can't talk anymore.
I said, we're all assigned guardian angels, and it may be that you were carried by an angel.
My gosh, can you imagine? Can you imagine just this side, just, when we're all in heaven and you get to sit down, and ask your guardian angel, or even at the feet of Jesus, just ask, who was that?
Yeah.
And I think our minds will be blown, just completely blown by what we will understand and know and just be revealed to us.
Yeah.
So, I'm grateful your mom was able to find peace enough to open up to that person and to trust a stranger with her child, with you.
Yeah.
So, I felt that. I felt that.
You're a mom.
I am. I couldn't imagine, going across a desert with an infant for 3 days. It's just a harrowing experience.
Yeah.
And I think I'm so glad you shared that, and because all of the people who are listening and watching can understand this is real. People who are experiencing this have real stories and experiences, and it's human experiences that you can't ignore.
This is not a political issue.
It is not.
We can't just say, okay, let Congress figure this out. This is a human issue. And Ernesto, I so appreciate you sharing. This has opened my mind and my heart in more of a way, because I want to be the kind of human that, like the scripture says, it says to love the stranger, the sojourner among you. And, our key verse, make room in your hearts. And make room in our hearts is hearing each other's stories.
Amen.
Yeah.
And connecting to those stories. And thank you so much for sharing.
Yeah, thank you. Such a powerful story. Powerful.
I like sharing this. Like I said, it's my life.
Yeah.
And I feel like if we can bring awareness to it.
Yeah.
And anybody out there that's listening to this story, let us know if you want to hear more about it. If you want to know more about it, we can send you resources and point you in the right direction.
Yeah. Thank you for being with us today. And I'm just thankful for, if it was an angel, for whoever it was that God sent to be with our brother and with his mom. That's amazing. So thank you for listening to our podcast this evening, and we'll see you our next episode.
See you next time.
Take care, everyone. Be blessed.